looking at presenting today, which is going to be for ArcGIS Pro. What I was talking about before is we were looking at this as a piece of the ArcGIS platform. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner, we have that desktop component, which is our thick client GIS-heavy components. And most of you are familiar with or have used ArcMap, ArcCatalog, ArcScene, and ArcGlobe. And obviously, this is going to focus on our newer generation, which is ArcGIS Pro. We see Pro as a modern desktop GIS that can seamlessly interface into the web to consume and create data that is accessed through other applications. These applications can be developed upon by yourselves or anything that you have that is out of the box. Now, ArcGIS Pro is 64-bit multi-threaded. It has a simplified user interface. It's a ribbon-based, very similar to Microsoft Office that you can use. It is an integrated platform, and by that I'm talking about is integrated into the greater ArcGIS platform, where it's connecting to and in harmony with ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. There is a combined 2D and 3D experience, so no longer do you have to jump in between different technologies in order to use both 2D and 3D. You can also create multiple maps within a view, if you look at the bottom icon, and have a multitude of different layouts that you can use to create your paper products or your PDFs that you share with everyone else. As of today, we have all of the analysis tools that are included with ArcMap, but we've also taken us up farther, and there are an enormous amount of tools that are available only within ArcGIS Pro. And then all the layers and all the tools and all the really nice pieces of GIS analysis that you create, we're able to share that through maps and through different layers. So what Esri has done is it's really taken the best parts of ArcMap, ArcCatalog, ArcGlobe, ArcScene, and fused them into one application. And it also took all of the runtime capabilities within City Engine that leverage procedural rules that can then be created to simulate your 3D cities, much like you see here on the screen. So when we talk about Pro, you really need to think about how Pro has been completely redesigned. There are likenesses to ArcMap, but it has a new look, a new feel. And that feel is meant to be contextual, where we have the ribbon atop the screen, that as you can click on different items are going to come on and be dynamic. If you click on a feature layer, you're going to have a different options available to you here than you would. It's intuitive, so it allows you to quickly jump between different layers in the maps, different maps within your environment. And it's a familiarity that allows you to make your traditional workflows even easier, because this is replacing the table of contents. Next is project-based, and project-based means that it takes into account all of the maps, tools, databases, layouts, server connections within a focused environment. We're going to touch upon a little bit more of that in a bit. And it's map focused. So we talked about how it's integrated 2D and 3D, and you can link these views together. You can leverage them all within one project or one map within the project. And then again, it's integrated in with the greater ArcGIS platform. So think about that WebGIS component and being able to share directly to ArcGIS Online or to your enterprise portals. For the analysis, the geoprocessing is going to be familiar to many of our desktop users. We do have a new concept for the gallery and favorite tools within the analysis tab and ribbon. We still encompass and utilize ModelBuilder Python windows, and it's a really great, powerful resource to use for imagery and raster analysis. With editing has been improved a lot. We do now 2D and 3D editing within this environment, all within that one desktop component. And speaking of editing, it is a simplified editing process. And by that, I mean we are always in a editing session. There is no longer a need for you to stop your edit sessions like you did within ArcMap. You still edit your shape files. You can still go in and work with file geodatabases, your enterprise geodatabases. That is all still supported. You're able to utilize group templates. So if you have a workflow stood up and you have your maps and tools and everything the way you want them to be, you can go in and create a template of that and then deploy that template out so that users will have the same editing components set up for them all ready to go. Mapping and visualization. We have a different rendering engines, and because of that, we have a performance and quality within our drawing that is improved. Some of the visualization aspects is multiple layouts, like you see in the upper right. Transparencies are able to be easier set. We support 3D cartography. Map series is also a really big capability that's been supported. And then we can do animations. So think about flying through certain areas or doing circles as if you're doing circles from a helicopter or from a drone, so you can get a 360 view. Now, we talked sharing a little bit before. These are some of the items that you can share. When you make a product and for instance, ArcGIS Online, and you add your feature layers, you created what we call a web map. In ArcGIS Pro, you're able to take your maps that you have within your map view and share those into that same component as a web map or as a web scene. You can also take the maps, the layer packages, and share those out, as well as the map packages. When we talk project packages, we're talking about taking the entire project to include all of the maps, application, or maps, databases, everything, and wrapping that up into one. We also have the ability to do really quick print and export, much like we had that capability within ArcMap. That is still there. And then we have a new type of style file. So many of you will use style files in ArcMap. Within ArcGIS Pro, it's now a style X file, and that's something to pay attention to moving forward. So within ArcGIS Pro, what really constitutes, hey, how do I break this up into different projects? Well, a map should be included within a project if you have a multitude of maps and layouts that focus on the same topic. If you have a database, folders, server connections, all relative to that one topic, those can be included within the project. Same with your tools and toolboxes. Style files are going to be important to maintain, to add those into the project. And then every time you create a project in ArcGIS Pro, you're going to have a default database that's going to be included in there. If there are outside databases that you want to add in there that are relative, those can all easily be done by adding it into the into your Pro package. The benefit of adding outside toolboxes, outside databases into your Pro package is when, or into your Pro project, is when you go to package those up and disseminate those packages, they will come with everything already included in there. So I ask you to think back and ask yourself these couple questions when you go to do this is, do you have maps that are related to each other? Do you have the same map that uses multiple layouts? Do you have the same data connections for groups of maps? And what are the different types of work that you do? You might want to look at dividing up your projects based off the scope of the work that you're working with. So now that we're talking about the types of works that you do, if there are certain things that you do, maybe one day you're going to do some editing, the next day you're going to do analysis, and you want to have a different look and feel for ArcGIS Pro, then you would want to start, I would recommend looking at project templates. These templates will allow you to quickly set up your editing environments, your mapping, your viewing, the interface, how the layouts are going to be, so you already have those created, any connections to servers, to databases, or to folders. And then all of your toolboxes can be easily customized and put into this project. Now, if you are just trying to get in, much like I did in ArcMap, I would get in, make a real quick feature class or a shapefile. You can still do that with ArcGIS Pro. You can start the option without starting a template. And nothing is written to the disk. It's all put into memory. You'll create your couple features, and then you can just close Pro, and you don't have to worry about some isolated project sitting out there that no one will ever use. All right, so what I like to do is just quickly look over into ArcGIS Pro and give you an idea of just some of the lay of the land of what the new interface looks like, how does it interact. Craig's going to go into a little bit more in the weeds with you about analysis and sharing. But when you open up ArcGIS Pro, this is going to be somewhat of the page that you will see. On the left-hand side here, we have our recent projects. These are ones that I can quickly open up and deploy. On the right-hand side are those templates that I talked about. So if I'm an all source analyst or I'm doing editing, I can quickly launch those templates and it'll create those projects for me and open that up. The next piece is going to be up here in the upper right. This is going to be my identity. So when we work with ArcGIS Pro, we talk about connecting to ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online. And you can see on the upper right, I've connected to www.arcgis.com. So that is pointing me to ArcGIS Online. And this is my sign-in, my identity. Now finally, this is the new column. So this is where I can create a new map, new catalogs, scenes. And when we launch that, it's going to ask me to create a new project. So if we give this a name, it'll also tell me a location. This is the default location that has been set for me to use. I can change that or I can stick with it. And we're going to quickly show you where that is being written to right now on disk. So as our project is created, we have a folder that's going to be written to, and that is going to be under our documents, ArcGIS, and projects. And then you can see in here the list of the projects that I'm currently working in. So ours, which is the webinar NGSE, I see here that I have a database, my Pro project file, and then I have an ArcGIS toolbox. And this is the same kind of format that we have throughout all of them. So it matches that name. And this is the default setting that I've created within ArcGIS Pro, or I could change. And I can see these locations based upon these two drop-downs here. So here's my toolbox, and here is my project-specific database. Now, if we move to the content side, this is going to be very similar, if not almost identical, to the table of contents within ArcMap. And much like in ArcMap, I have my layers that we can turn on and turn off. I can look by source. I can look by selection. But with ArcGIS Pro, it gives me a little bit more capabilities where I can turn on and off editing. I can list the layers and choose snapping. I can list them by which ones I want to have turned on by labeling. And I can even, for appropriate imagery layers, I can actually have those listed by the respective imagery. And Craig is going to show you that here in a few. Now, we mentioned before this catalog, and this is going to be very similar to our catalog that you're familiar with. But when we talk about the project, I can see here that I have a few things already available to me within my project. I have my map, which we see in the middle of the screen. I have different styles that come default with every new project. I have a single folder connection. And then I have locators, and these locators are going to be provided by either my organization or my ArcGIS Enterprise. The map section here is going to be very similar to the behavior that you're used to seeing, where you can zoom in, zoom out, add different layers into your map. None of that behavior has changed. It's still very reactive. It's dynamic. It's a very well-functional piece of capability here. The main thing I want to talk about is this upper part, which is what we call our ribbons. And the ribbons are going to be dynamic. If you notice here, I have a list of a few different tabs that I can click on, and I have different tools available to me. However, if I select an item within my contents, I get a different option popped up here. I choose on the hillshade, I again have additional capability. That is that dynamic capabilities that we're talking about within the ribbon, where you will have different capabilities enabled and turned on for you and available for you to use. Adding or switching out your base maps is very easy to do. You simply can select and choose the one that you would like, and those are being pulled by default from ArcGIS Online. If, however, if you're using your ArcGIS Enterprise portal, you can, depending upon how your administrator has it set, you can connect through ArcGIS Online, or you would connect to a local copies of your base maps. When we go to add data, this gives me a different list of capabilities where I can add data, whether I want to extract data from locations, add elevations, add route events. If I want to just add data to my map, I can do so. And here it gives me a couple options where I can search. First is directly within my project, so these database and this folder connection here. Next is going to be through my portal portal. So this will be ArcGIS Online, or it's going to be my ArcGIS Enterprise portal. And lastly is going to be locally on my machine here. So I can quickly search anything that has not been already included within my project and add that information here. So if I want to search, for example, in my content, and I want to do a quick search for an item, I can add that information directly into my map. And this is actually pulling it from the web. So this WebGIS desktop connectivity. It's very quick and easy to do. Now, once we've gotten a 2D map into the process, the next thing I want to do is I want to look at taking the 3D element into it. So on the Insert tab on the left-hand side, there's a new map, and I can hit the drop-down. I'm going to choose New Global Scene. And if you look on the right-hand side, it created that scene right here within my project, so I can quickly switch in between those. Now I want to add data to that. And the easiest way for me to add data is to do a folder connection. And when I want to do that folder connection, I can right-click under my folders, paste that information in, and then I'll scroll down and I will connect to that folder. So this is much of the same look and feel that, that you should be accompanied or used to from ArcMap. Now, if we want to add that data, I'm going to actually add some Varicon data. And we have Varicon data from certain areas here, and we're going to go to Tokyo. So by dragging and dropping that product into my map, I can zoom directly into the Tokyo downtown area, zoom in, and then I can quickly start to pan and zoom around my map to get a good look and feel of what this high resolution 3D mesh from Varicon will actually provide us. Now, the really neat thing I like is within ArcGIS Pro, we can dock windows. So I'm not limited to just tabbing in between two. I can grab and I can dock above, below, to the left, to the right, however it is that makes sense to me. And so we have that 2D and 3D capabilities directly within one another. Now, if you're working and you want to focus on one, you can link the views together by simply the center point of the map or by center and scale. So when I select that, it's going to zoom us over into the Monterey area, where I can quickly zoom in within the left-hand side. I can grab around the right and twist my map, and that 2D map will actually make the same change. Now, the last part I want to focus on is under the analysis. Within this analysis tool, I can quickly open up and do a quick search for any standard tool that I'm looking for. And as I type, I'm going to get that information here on the right-hand side. And then finally, we're talking about this sharing. This is going to allow me to share content into either through a project, through jobs, or through different templates. The very last part I want to talk about is how can we make little changes to ArcGIS Pro to make it more of a user-friendly environment. And the first thing is if you hit the project tab on the upper left and select portals, this is where you can add in and manage the ArcGIS Online or the Enterprise portal connections that you want to do. Depending upon what you want to add, those would be the formats that you can choose from here. Also, the one thing that I really stress that we all look at is under the options section and then under general. This is where we can create those projects. And by default, every project is going to be saved to that default location we talked about. If, however, you want to save it to a different location, you can go in and you can choose that location from here to save your projects, your databases, or your toolboxes. And then finally, for those of you who work in either extremely bright or extremely dark lit rooms, you have the option to change the theme of your ArcGIS Pro, which will either make it a dark theme or a light theme. So moving from just the quick lay of the land of ArcGIS Pro, I'd like to kind of talk to you about migrating from ArcMap. So is ArcGIS Pro a replacement for ArcMap is the big question that a lot of people will ask. And the short answer is yes. Now, it's important to note that if you are an ArcMap user, ArcMap is going to continue to be released, and development and innovation, however, is going to be focused on ArcGIS Pro, which means that after 10.8, which is our current release, the support for ArcMap is only going to be limited to providing patches, updates, and then making sure any new environment certification is established based off of the new ArcGIS Desktop product lifecycle. And finally, there's going to be little new functionality in each of the releases for ArcMap, and we are encouraging users to move to ArcGIS Pro as soon as you are able to complete the workflows that you're doing within the ArcGIS Pro environment. Now, when you make the jump to ArcGIS Pro from ArcMap, there's a couple new things of terminology that you should be aware of. On the screen is a list of what those are. And there is a terminology guide that is available at the URL below that will provide you a complete list of the different terminologies that you'll have. So now that you're looking at making the switch from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro, how do you start to get some of those MXD documents and all of your information into ArcGIS Pro so that you can begin to use it? Well, there is items that are able to be imported in. Those are going to be your MXDs, your SXDs, and your 3D files. Maps, layouts, symbology, scenes, and models can all be imported in. Map packages as well can be imported in. And if you look at the two icons on the left, there is little difference in between how your map and how your product in ArcMap will look compared to ArcGIS Pro. ArcGIS Pro will honor and have all the abilities that ArcMap has. So you're not going to lose any of your capabilities. So when you import that in, you just select the Import Map under the Insert tab in order to do that. The next is we keep talking about these styles. So you have these style files that you're using, and you don't want to have to go in and recreate all of those, whether it's 3 of them or whether it's 103 of them. There is a new style format to be aware of, which is the style X file, and because of that, you can't just directly use style files from ArcMap within ArcGIS Pro unless you import them in. So by default, you're going to have ArcGIS 2D, 3D, ArcGIS colors, and the color brewer schemes RGB. You also are able to, like I said before, have those styles from ArcMap imported into ArcGIS Pro. However, the new capability is that within ArcGIS Pro, you can search ArcGIS Online for style files that are available publicly and import those in as well. So when you want to import this in, the first is to hit the upper right, which is where we can import those files in. And then this is where we can go in through our catalog to go in and start to begin and add those style files. So I'll quickly show you a quick demonstration of that as well. All right, so I have a ArcMap migration project here. And what I want to do with this is I want to import in a map product. Now, if we look over at an MXD, so here's ArcMap. I have 2 data frames. One is called Kelburn, the other is called Wellington. And then I also have a layout that I want to import into this environment. And we can do so by hitting that Import Map. I'm going to navigate to that folder. And we're going to select that MPK. Now, this could be an MXD. If I'm using this could be a scene file, whatever it is you need to add in based off what we can. So here is that newly imported MXD. And I have my one map here. If I scroll to the top, I can see here's my Wellington. And then if I look at my layouts, I can quickly see that I have my layout view here as well. The last point I want to make is for the style files. If you want to import, you simply select the import, go to that location. You can create your new style here. Or if you come into your catalog and hit portal, search all of your portal, type style X, you can go in and then you can search all of the publicly available ones. So maybe you want to look at crime analysis. If you simply right-click and add style, it will add that style into the layout view, or the style file, sorry. Try the survey one, add style. So now we have that survey style right here as well. The last part I want to focus on is that terminology guide. So if you go to Esri.com and this URL, we can go in and we can start to look at that terminology guide and get an idea of what those different terms are going to be used for. So if you want to see general terms, mapping, visualization, sharing, and then finally editing. And with that, we'll take a few questions.
Great. So we have some questions in the question and answer widget. The first one is, how do you access extensions?
Okay. So extensions, primarily going to be one, you're going to go to your licensing section and you're going to have a list and you need to determine whether or not you are properly licensed for that extension here. Okay. The other parts are going to be when you come in, those extensions will then be available for you within the tabs up at the top of the screen. And yep. So that should allow you to make sure that extension is available to you. All right. So you'll see some of those capabilities. For instance, the military tools extension will then be available here for me. And then the crime analysis section will be there. All right. Next question.
Great. Is having multiple maps in ArcPro similar to having multiple data frames in ArcMap?
So that's a good question. It's a yes and no. So it's really about having, it's the same functionality as multiple data frames within ArcMap. However, each one is its own individual map. So think of each map within your Pro project as its own MXD that are all grouped together within a Pro package. Next question.
Yep, we have two more. Can multiple people use the same project?
So multiple people using the same project. So projects are going to be locally used. So it would be one desktop, that project would be locally stored. However, you can create Pro packages in order to, once you've stood up a project, you can create Pro packages to provide analysis to a multitude of editors and then combine the changes at the end. You had one more?
Yep. And then the last question was about having shared toolboxes included in the project file.
Okay. So if there is a location, for instance, if you see on my screen here, if I want to go to, let me find a toolbox. So I'll do this, I'll do it with a database. It's the same principle as a toolbox. So here I have a local database. This database is going to have some information for me. This could be on a network drive, very similar to a toolbox. In order to add that into the database section here, you simply go down and you right-click and go Add to Project. By adding it to Project, it'll appear within the database folder within ArcGIS Pro. And then when I go to do a Pro package or anything like that, it will include that database within that Pro package. All right, thank you all for the questions. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Craig Cleveland, who is going to move forward talking about analysis, sharing, visualization, and imagery.
Fantastic, thanks, Scott. Can you just confirm you're able to hear me and see my screen?
Can see it just fine.
All right, great. So that was a wonderful overview, how to get started using ArcGIS Pro and what the UI looks like, what are some of the key navigation elements, and then, for those of you that are coming from that ArcMap background, how do you migrate and get started using ArcGIS Pro. As Scott mentioned, what I'd like to do from there is pick it up and talk to you about some more analysis and GP related workflows, as well as dive a little bit more deeply into the sharing elements, and then talk about some different data types here. So we'll get started and look at a few different vignettes to hopefully give you an idea of what's possible using ArcGIS Pro. One of the first things we want to do is bring content in. As you saw, Scott, he navigated to some services and some local file-based data. But one of the realities that we're often faced with is our data isn't always in clean GIS formats. You know, we get things in the form of photos, we get things in the form of Word documents, text files, PowerPoints, and the like. If we look at one of these files, we can see that, you know, there are actually spatial elements within here, whether those in the form of place names or coordinate locations and things of the like. So as an analyst, I could go through these, I could scour through all these files individually and bring those locations into ArcGIS Pro, but obviously that would be a very manual and painstaking process. So what we can do is utilize one of my favorite geoprocessing tools here, which is the ability to extract locations. If we open that up, I can then drag and drop a folder here onto the UI, specify an output name, and then we can go ahead and extract locations from this. So this is going to go through and scour all those documents that are there on disk. And in this case, it's going to find all the coordinate locations and put those on my map. So as you can imagine, that's a pretty powerful you know, geoprocessing workflow. And then I can actually click on these and begin to interact. And what I see is the way the tool works out of the box without any configurations is it'll find my coordinate information here, and it'll extract certain text elements before it finds the coordinate as well as after the coordinate, and then it tells me where it is on disk. So it's a really powerful workflow. What I like to do though, however, is to take this a step further and, you know, beyond just using it directly out of the box, is integrate this into a model. So here I have that same out of the box extract locations element, but I've exposed a number of the parameters in here so users can input those a little bit more sophisticated fashion than you know, just one particular input. Specifically, what I want to do here in this case, just to take it one step farther and sort of ease into some of our geoprocessing workflows, is I want to apply a style file. Scott has been talking about the styles and the layer files here. And in this case, I have a layer file, which will help me with some of the styling on the content as I bring it in, as well as take care of some of the pop-up elements. So we'll go ahead and run this tool. And in this case, we have the location defaulted. And I'm just going to change my output here, and we'll rerun this. So now, again, automating that process, chaining together a couple of inputs for me, and it will provide me an output here into my contents. If we zoom in, what we'll see is now I've done some very simple styling on this that'll show me, hey, what type of file type was discovered here, whether it was a Word document, a JPEG, or a PowerPoint, and then just done a little bit of styling on the pop-up here to make it a little bit more user-friendly. So now I have some context around the location that was found. Here are the actual coordinates that are highlighted, and if I need it, a hyperlink to the source file here, so I have easy access and can bring that right up and engage with it. So that's one step in geoprocessing, right? Ingesting data, bringing it into our system so then we can begin to work with it, do whatever analytical workflows we need to around our particular problem set. Once we have some of that data, you know, we want to start to think about, okay, how do we visualize this? How do we make sense of this data? How do we understand it a little bit better? In this map, what we're looking at is a data source probably many of you are familiar with, which is anti-shipping activity messages, which is essentially piracy data. There's a lot of data here. It's hard to, you know, look at it and really begin to understand, hey, what is, where are my hotspots around the world? Where are these clusters of activities? And while I can see it a little bit, it's hard to find that. So I want to look at my geoprocessing tools here. And we can open this up. We can do a search for our hotspot tool. And in this case, I want to highlight for you all the Find Hotspots, which is a part of our GeoAnalytics desktop tools. If we open this up and add my input layer, and we're going to set some parameters for it. And what I want to do is use this tool to find statistically significant hot and cold spots that might be occurring within my data. So rather than just looking at these points all across the globe, I can begin to, again, make sense of it within a scientific fashion. So what's going on with our GeoAnalytics desktop tool is actually running Spark under the hood. And while this data that we're looking at may not necessarily be considered big data, let's go ahead and let me just do this one more time here, guys. Sorry about that. All right. We'll run that one more time. So now it's going to find us these statistically significant hotspots. And again, like I said, this may not be necessarily considered big data, but it's a great visualization of how we can do that there very quickly. So we'll toggle off this layer, and now as I begin to zoom into some different parts of the world, we can see that look at those specific hotspots and begin to make sense of some of this data there off the Horn of Africa and over here, of course, in Malaysia. Now, let me zoom back to my start. That gives us a look at things at a snapshot in time. What I like to do often is I like to see this dynamically as I'm moving through my data, as I'm working with my data. So another great geoprocessing tool that I'd like to introduce you to is something called feature binning. There we go. So we'll open this up, and I'm going to run it on that same data source, and we can choose what type of bin we like. I'm going to go with the hexagon here. We'll let that run, and that's going to enable binning on my anti-shipping activity messages here, and it's going to give us a bit of a view similar to the hotspots, but more dynamic and really just around the visualization of things. So if I highlight the layer, you can see I now have a bin tab here. It sort of speaks to the contextual nature of ArcGIS Pro that Scott was talking about. I'm going to go ahead and modify the bin size here on the fly to be a little bit more appropriate for the scale that we're working at and what we're looking at. So again, if I zoom in here, we will see that these bins will rearrange dynamically based off of the scale of the map and based off of the number of points that are in a particular location. We can also apply some symbology options here. If we want to do things like go ahead and label the bins based off of the number of features that's in a particular bin here. So I'll go ahead and up the bin size so we can see the label a little bit better. And now we can see as it's doing that binning on the features, how many features are being collected into that one individual bin. All right, so let's continue on and sort of move up in sophistication here. We've talked about ingesting data into our system. Then we've talked about some geoprocessing tools to help us with visualization techniques, whether that's a static shot in time over hotspots or the binning, which is a little bit more dynamic on our data. But now we want to get into some deeper analysis and look at ways that we can use scripting within ArcGIS Pro. So this is a map here of COVID-19 cases across the US, obviously very timely and very relevant here. And one of the things that has come up in conversation across the scientific community is the need to look at not just cases, but also the quantity of testing that is going on to validate various rates of infection or death or other things of that nature. A colleague of mine actually put together this package, and one of the things he created, which is a great highlight for a new capability at ArcGIS Pro 2.5, is a notebook. So at ArcGIS Pro 2.5, we now have the ability to have Python notebooks right within the application itself. And what's great about a notebook is it's going to allow us to have those scripting capabilities within the desktop, but it gives us a visual element. So not only are we going to be able to run a process, we're going to be able to easily describe it and do it in an interactive nature. And so here he describes the notion of this notebook supplementing this case data, which you are all probably very familiar with, you know, the John Hopkins dashboard and this sort of case data, but then integrating it with this data that's coming from the COVID tracking project, which is an open source project that's collecting metrics on things like test data at the state level. So we could execute this notebook, and what's fantastic about it, again, is just the visual, the understanding, but also if I need to modify it for my own purposes. So if I were to walk through, I understand what libraries I need, I can see what we're doing in terms of ingesting the data, preparing it, and then ultimately saving it locally here on my system. And if I needed to make modifications to it, I could. He also shared this in a Python toolbox, which is a part of my Pro project here. We can see this Python toolbox. And what's great is, you know, if I need to just run this, I need to get this data now. I don't want to do it in the interactive fashion of a notebook. I'm able to open up the tool here, and it is all set and ready to run. I can provide additional parameters if I'd like, and I'm going to go ahead and check this first one, which will provide us with a state grade layer, which is essentially, you know, helping us to understand or give us a score as to how states are doing in terms of, you know, improving the testing that's going on at the state level. So let's run this tool, and we'll go ahead and get a look at this content that it brings down locally from that data source. As you can see, we have a lot of data that's going on. There's been big improvements in terms of testing. So this is rendered, giving us an understanding of how many tests we're seeing per million across the state. And then below that, we're actually seeing that state grade layer. And what I'd like to highlight here, just from a visualization perspective, is toggle on the data that we have from last week. And then swipe away to see the improvements that have been made in that testing that's been being tracked on the COVID-19 project there. So we can see in particular, a lot of states have improved the grade in terms of the testing that they've been doing. Hopefully that's a few minutes to give you a look at some of the, you know, a high level, the key capabilities, some of the geoprocessing things that you can do, and hopefully you're thinking of ways that you can take advantage of that in ArcGIS Pro. Building on the point that Scott talked about in terms of ArcGIS Pro being an integrated system, it's great that I, as a GIS professional, can do this work here locally on my machine, but it's even better that I can take advantage of this integrated system and share my content and my results off with other users to use in their analysis or to take greater advantage of the work that I've done. That can be done through this Share tab here. And from a sharing perspective, we have many ways in which we can do it. We have the ability to share through packages, which is extremely powerful, particularly for any of you who've come up you know, through the old ArcMap days and some of the challenges that we found in terms of you know, very early on sharing content with others and packaging things up. We have the ability to share as a project package, which is a way to package up not only my map, but all of the resources that make up this Pro project. So the toolboxes, the geodatabases, those things that Scott highlighted. So someone will have this whole capability. And actually this particular Pro project is available in that manner in ArcGIS Online. We can also share just the map. So if it's just the map and the data we want to share, we can do that. We can share to a mobile map package. So if we want people to take advantage of this on handheld mobile clients like Explorer for ArcGIS, maybe going to be in a disconnected setting and we want to do that, we can access that. Same is true for individual layers if it's just one layer we want to share. And then even our geoprocessing capabilities we can share as well. And I'll highlight that here by clicking our Get USA State Testing Data and just show you what that looks like and how users can share it. You have the ability to share it to online, or you can save a package to a local file. Give it a name that gets stored as this GPKX, and we can simply provide tags and then share that off. So it would package everything up in that GPKX file and be available for you to share either as a file itself through users, or you could share it to that upload process to ArcGIS Online. What I do a lot of myself is work in that WebGIS capacity, whether it's an ArcGIS Online organization or an ArcGIS Enterprise portal. So I really like to share my results as services, and I can do that also here as web maps, or I can share individual layers to my enterprise portal. So I'd like to highlight that process for you all and share the latest testing data grade. And I'm going to do that. I could do that up here through the share as web layer, or through the context menu, I have the ability to choose to share and then share as a web layer. There is the name for the service that will be created. I can provide summary details of it. I can also give it tags to help make it more discoverable. So we can do things, give it these details. All right. Then we have options for the service that I'm about to create. Do I want to reference this data where it lives on disk, or do I need to copy this up to the server? And then what layer type we are going to choose. And this option here will be controlled by a few different factors. One is the type of layer you're sharing, as well as where you're sharing it to. Scott highlighted for us the idea of managing our portals, the different portals we'd be connected to. And in my case, I'm connected to an ArcGIS Enterprise portal. So I have the option here to share this as a map layer, and I'd like to do that. Additionally, there are configuration elements that we can provide where we can specify different endpoints we might like to make available, like OGC endpoints like WMS or KML. And ultimately, when we're ready, we can go ahead and publish this layer. So I'm going to let that run. It'll prepare this content, and then it's going to share it to my ArcGIS Enterprise portal. And I'll go ahead and show you all that now as a service, and really just highlight that sharing capability and how we take things from our desktop, but get it shared up to others to be able to take advantage of this. So this will just take a moment. Obviously, this depends on the quantity of content we're sharing, where it's being shared to, and sort of how it's being shared. So here we are. This is my ArcGIS Enterprise portal. We'll go over to my content. And what we will see is here's the layer that I just published a moment ago. And let's open that in our map viewer. And so now we can see that data. And now this is a layer that others could utilize in their analysis or as backdrops in the workflows and things they're doing, and really highlights the importance of that integrated environment that Scott introduced us to. All right, one last thing I would like to show you all here, and that is I want to talk about imagery a bit. So we've talked about some analysis and geoprocessing workflows. We've talked about sharing our content. Scott gave us a great introduction, but we've been almost exclusively focused on vector data. And one of the key things that we like to highlight about ArcGIS Pro is that it is a first-class client to raster data and imagery. No GIS is complete with that. And that is true whether we're looking at imagery that's on disk, like this multispectral image that I have here that I'm rendering from a local drive. It's also true, regardless of the modality that we're using, like a panchromatic image that we have here. And it's also true that we don't have to just work with imagery locally. This is an example of a service that we're drawing from here in ArcGIS Pro. And that service is reading images that are stored in S3 buckets and doing things like rendering and orthorectification on the fly. So it's really a powerful client to the imagery, and is just as powerful with its imagery workflows as it is at vector workflows. So let's go ahead and zoom in on this imagery here. Whoop, turn on my panchromatic imagery. And we'll zoom into the downtown San Francisco area. And so what are some of the things that we can do with our imagery? We're able to apply stretches to it on the fly. So we can choose a stretch, and we can see our image re-rendered based off of that stretch, and it's applied to those pixels that are being shown on the screen right now. We can also do things like dynamic range adjustment, and we can see the changes that it makes, again, to that part of the image that is rendering right here within my map. Let's jump back out to the larger Bay Area and look at our service again. From that service perspective, we may want to work with the service as is, the collection of imagery, but there's also a good chance we may want to work with an actual individual image that is within our service. So we have the ability to pull out those individual images that make up a service. So within my Raster Item Explorer here, I can actually preview all the individual images and just thumb my way through them, look at that preview, and see that image, see if it's the one I want. I can also inspect the metadata of that image here. So if I want to look at key metadata details about that image, we have access to that information at our fingertips. If I know that this is the image that I'm interested in and I want to add that to my map, I can say add to current map. And I'll toggle off the service now and go ahead and get zoomed over to the downtown area. And I can begin working with this individual image that I just pulled from that service. If we're looking at this image, what we see is a lot of distortion here in the downtown area. That's because we're orthorectifying this on the fly. This is an image that was definitely taken off nadir. So we see those distortions, in areas like this. But we want to be able to look at this in really the native look angle, or really up is up, or in that image space. So as Scott said, we can list by perspective imagery here. And I'm going to go ahead and set the focus on this image. And now what we'll see is that image render from the angle that the image was captured at. And now this makes a lot more sense to me. We can see our downtown buildings here are not distorted. We can see the Bay Bridge. It looks appropriately. And what's great is as we focus an image, we're given the metadata for it here right at our fingertips, so we can understand the capture date, obliquity, the time since acquisition. Those are all key details that an image analyst might like to have at their fingertips. I'm going to zoom in to the downtown area just to show you one other key capability that we can use here with our imagery, and that's the ability to mensurate. So we'll go ahead and measure one of these towers here, and we can see that that tower is about 160 meters tall. So a really key capability to allow us to more interactively engage with this imagery. I know we're getting close on time here, so I want to move to my last piece, and that is full motion video. So as we talk about imagery, it's not just images on disk or image services or that static imagery, but also motion imagery. So I'm going to open up a full motion video that I have here, and I'm going to set that to play and show you some of the key capabilities within this tool. I can zoom my map over to where the video is taken, and we'll go ahead and change the colors here to make that stand out a little bit more. But what I'm able to see is the path that the bird is flying as it's taking the image, as well as the footprint that's being captured here on the ground. Other key capabilities and ways I'm able to engage with this is to add graphics on the map. So if I wanted to, say, capture a particular point of a storage tank, I can click on the map, or excuse me, click on the video, and that point gets rendered here on the map. So it's very powerful in terms of the interaction between the video and the map. Other things we might like to do are grab a snapshot in time. So we can grab a snapshot from the video that will actually create an image locally on disk, and that image is then georeferenced and added to my map here. Finally, I know one of the things that a lot of folks that deal with motion imagery have to do is capture PowerPoint presentations from this to show a particular detail and time. And we have the ability to export directly to a PowerPoint presentation. And not only will it export the video frames, but it will also export all the metadata. So there was the point in the video where we were, there was the footprint of the sensor, and there was the location of the bird as it was capturing that video. Finally, to show you one other key capability as it relates to motion imagery is something we've been spending a lot of time on, and that's the idea of VMTI, or video motion imagery. Well, fortunately, I think we got a little bit of a challenge here. Give me one more second, and we'll open that up, and we'll show you that last imagery piece here, because I don't want to end on a sour note here. So we'll just load this back up. Give me 1 second, and we'll take a look at that VMTI data, and then we'll take a few questions and move on from there. Okay, so let me open up my VMTI video here. And want to go ahead and play this. And just like the other imagery, I want to go ahead and zoom to the location on the map. And what's amazing about this is we are able to display those VMTI graphics. So what this is doing is actually capturing the moving targets on the video in real time. And we can see those graphics here on my map. And we're also able to export those graphics out. So if we need to see where these moving target indicators were and then do further analysis on that, we're able to have that level of interaction with the video. Okay, so with that, I am going to hand it back over to Scott here, who will give us a couple of resources that we might want to take away from today's session, and then we'll take a few questions before we wrap up.
All right, Craig, can you confirm you see my screen?
I can see your screen, yep.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I know we're running short on time, so I want to just talk about some of the resources that you can use while everyone is at home right now. And the first is to access our training classes. We have a multitude of classes that are available to you, both at no cost, and there are some instructor-led courses online that you can take that will have a cost associated to them, but you can sign up for those on our training website. We have videos. A multitude of videos are available to you at your fingertips with just a quick web search, particularly on YouTube. There are a lot of different videos covering all sorts of topics within ArcGIS. Learn.arcgis.com has a lot of different capabilities and lesson plans that you can follow in order to learn different capabilities. For instance, getting started with ArcGIS Pro. Blogs are important. If you sign up and maintain the blogs, you'll be able to log in and view what's new and what's coming and stay up to date on current events within ArcGIS. Books. Paper is the way to go when you are not worried about plugging in your phone or your Kindle at the airport. We have plenty of books through Esri Press that are available to you to utilize within your learning endeavors. And please don't forget our help documentation. Esri has spent a lot of time and effort to really make sure that our help documents are up to date, accurate, and thorough so that users can go in and research questions that they have or start to tinker and learn little new tricks, like some of that Python notebooks and information like that. Finally, when we're looking at that, don't forget to reach out to the greater community through GeoNet. Ask questions, do research. You can learn a lot of information just by accessing GeoNet. And finally, for the developers that are in the call, here is through our developer SDK, there are a list of resources and tutorials to allow you to get into ArcGIS Pro through the SDK to perform work and analysis. And with that, we can open it up for a few questions.
Great. I'll start with some questions on the imagery workflows. Is the image service layer only available with the image analyst extension?
No, we can add image services to ArcGIS Pro, without that extension, but some of the key capabilities that you saw me go through there would require the extension.
All right, and the next one, they're interested about imagery algorithms such as NDVI or user selection of band combinations.
Yes, those capabilities, the ability to do NDVI, modified band combinations, absolutely all very much possible. Using ArcGIS Pro, the image analyst extension, that can be done. Just didn't have enough runway to cover it all today, but yes.
And then this one is specifically about the AIS data. You
Yep.
said that you were running Spark. Was that a local instance? And is there a way to connect to a bigger Spark cluster?
Yeah, so the Spark is running under the hood. That's actually all a part of ArcGIS Pro. So there's nothing you have to do with your local user environment to do that. We are taking advantage of Spark and have brought the appropriate components to the core ArcGIS Pro install. In terms of reaching out to larger Spark environments, I'm getting a little bit out of my swim lane here, but I think that's where we would engage with our geoanalytics server capabilities and looking into some of our big data workflows.
All right, and then this one is, this one was brought up when you guys were talking about sharing out information. They were asking about privacy, and if you just wanted to share with a few people or a group of people.
Yeah, yes, great question. Fantastic. In my haste to move through that, I glossed over some of those details. But yeah, when we do the sharing and we share to our ArcGIS Enterprise portal or ArcGIS Online, we have the option to specify who we share that with, whether it's everyone, whether it's a group, or whether we don't share it at all and we keep it private to ourselves. So that can happen both at the moment of sharing from ArcGIS Pro, but also, once we're in the browser and in the web UI for those environments.
Great, I think that wraps it up for the questions. I just want to say thank you to our presenters today, Scott and Craig. I hope that this session has been helpful, and there are a few unanswered questions still, and you can type in some last minute questions if you want. We'll stick around for a few more minutes, but for the main portion of this is done. So thanks a lot, Craig and Scott, and we appreciate your time.
Thanks, Margie.
Thank you, Margie.